front of you. As of November 30th, 2017, we have collected $15,054,972, or 96.5% of our budgeted tax receipts for the year. And we are currently, year-to-date, under budget by $962,542. Are there any questions?
Is that under projected budget?
Yes.
Okay, so with the monies not yet, the 3.5% not yet collected, that's the 960,000 that would make it full budget?
That's correct.
All right. Pay your tax.
Any
other
others?
questions? Okay,
No? All right,
thank you very much. Okay, that brings us fittingly to Budget and Finance.
The Budget and Finance Committee met to review the findings of the audit, which will be presented this evening. And I do believe we will be presented with a clean opinion, most importantly. We also had another agenda item to carry on the conversation about the financial model behind the press at the AADL. The action step, as I recall, is to look at sort of what the benchmark might be for other programs like this, to see what kinds of licensing agreements are being made with others. We're not sure what we're going to find because this is a relatively new type of initiative in the industry, but that is the next step, to look at comparable licensing agreements. As people will recall from our discussion as a full board, there was some conversation around the current licensing agreement with authors that contract with the library. Essentially, the library doesn't hold any copyright or receive any kind of fiduciary benefit from the publication and sale of these books, which is in general fine until perhaps someone writes Harry Potter, and then maybe we would like to benefit from that. And still might be fine,
according to some of us.
So we're doing our research with the staff to understand. It would actually be absolutely fine in either case. Doing our research to just dig a little deeper into how these arrangements are made with other peer organizations. That is all that I have to report from the BNF committee.
Great, any questions? I know there was interest in discussing that last bit, although perhaps the people who are most interested in it were on the committee anyhow and got to discuss it, but any further questions?
We discussed it.
Okay, great.
I was one of those interested parties, so I had many of my questions answered.
Great. Well, then let's move on to the executive committee. So the executive committee has met twice since we were last together. The first time we met on November 30th with John Kavanaugh, right? Kavanaugh. Okay. I need to mess his name up at every board meeting. That's like required. So he presented us with the survey that we gave to the public the last time we conducted an EPIC MRA survey. And we went through that with him question by question. And evaluated whether the questions we asked that during the last time made sense to ask this time. We talked about how we're reevaluating the presence of the library and we want to ask questions related to that, whereas the last time we talked more about Westgate and what features people wanted to see there and communications. And he took all of our feedback and has prepared for us something which is stapled on your desks. It's in the ephemera packet if you have the board packet online. And so we'll talk about this when we get to the 3.3 section of the agenda, but I just want to make sure that you know that this is here. And then we met again a week ago tonight to discuss the director's evaluation process. And we received all the information from Sarah, who is here tonight, and she's going to present that to you, so I won't go into detail about that. Any questions?
We should probably say that the survey is not the final
Yeah,
And
this,
it's not posted online because it's a draft.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's all
I'm
right.
sorry to the 5 people who are watching online, but this is not in your online packet yet, but you'll see it eventually. Okay. Great, so we'll discuss this draft later on. Okay, great. So let's move on to the director's report.
Thank you. So the first slide is going to be about the 5-star library for 10 years in a row. And I just want to say, as the director of a library that's achieved this, the thanks truly goes to the folks who work at the library and all the levels of all the work that happens. You can't pull this off for 10 years in a row without a lot of commitment and consistency and a lot of talent and enthusiasm and creativity. And that's what we have here. And it's pretty remarkable, and it's a pure pleasure if you're in my job. And I want to publicly make that statement, that I feel so proud of that. Also, we acknowledge this evening those who have served as governing board members of the library from before it was a district to today in a reception upstairs, and how important it is to acknowledge and understand those persons who've been in those positions have made sure the library had the support and funding from the community, and were that voice and that messenger out that is critical. So it takes all of it. The Friends of the Library, the Ladies Library Association, the people who come in weekly, the people who come in monthly, the people who come in once a year, the people who never come in but who gladly pay to have a great public library in their community are all to be thanked for this. It's so amazing. This map shows you those 13 libraries that have achieved 5 stars for 10 years. Only 13 out of the thousands in America were able to do this, and we're one of them. And it's just a great thrill, and we're pleased. I do want to comment that the West Bloomfield Public Library was a 4-star library in Michigan this year, and the Richland, did I get it right? Richland Public Library was 5-star in Michigan last year. The one time we had a partner, and this year they're 4 stars. So we're so pleased for them as well. So in Michigan, there are libraries every year that join us on this list, but just not where we are on this list. So thank you all. Thank you very much. It's wonderful. To the public, whoever's watching. This is bigger news, really, for the ones of us who are at work every day at the library. We're going to be launching a new website and a new, what most people call the catalog, a new catalog. In the industry, it's an ILS system, but to most of the folks who use the library, it's a catalog. In January 2nd. So this is a handout that's been given out at the desks. The board members all have received one, and we're posting information about this on social media and on the library website to make sure everyone knows what's happening when, what they can expect to see with going on with their card, and the closures around this. We will be closing on the 30th, the 31st, and the 1st. We will not have a website on those 3 days. There will not be a catalog. So the library really will not be open. And it's not happened in 10 years, so I want to make sure that we all know that's going to happen. And then on January 2nd, it all comes back open, and it's up. Right, Eli?
Yep.
So a lot of work's gone into this. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. We spent over a year planning the website and 3 years planning the new catalog system. Thank you. Go ahead. And this is the 4th floor. Boardroom has been redecorated, redone. The UN model desks have been taken out, and we've recarpeted and repainted. There's new lighting. There will be new sound and new video placed in that space for meetings. And you see it as it's now configured. The curved wall remains at the back, just for because of the way it was built. It's too much trouble and too expensive to take it out, so it's left there. But otherwise, that room is a great big open space now. So we're going to be. There's a program there this evening, up in that space. These are some of the comments that we thought you'd want to see. We had a wonderful program at Pittsville. Dr. Kang, who was there, posed with a family who let us know that they'd recently moved to Pittsville Township, and that was their first time at the library, and they'll be back to get their cards for the whole family. So it was a really great picture. We're really happy about that. Rachel Yanakolu, who we'll acknowledge later, retired after over 30 years at AADL, and we put up a Facebook retirement page, and Rachel got lots of love. And so these are photographs of Rachel on her last day, and there's a picture of the bookmobile. Rachel drove it and managed the bookmobile service here in its early years. So this is a summary of some of the staff comments, public comments, around the 5-star. And I really can't read it from here. So was there one in particular, Eli?
Not in particular.
Okay, so all good, obviously. And this little fella was proud to show his library card. He is a student, and he's super excited because of his field trip to the library, and he got his card. He was so ready about that. That one. And then this is someone who came to the bookshop and to the big sale. Took a picture of all of the books that he bought and how happy he is about the library and the bookshop in particular. This is a person who is learning to crochet, and he has shared his experience with us and others in a very fun and happy way. He has a picture of this crochet. And there's a picture of Tiny Expo and all the crowds and all the people who were there, and it's a great place to get wonderful handmade items that will last for a very long time from local craftsmen and artisans in the public library, in the lobby. It's very cool. The Traverwood branch somehow made it back out in architectural circles a couple months ago, and when it did, it was bounced back around, and we got some great feedback from our public about how much they love how the architecture of the Traverwood branch. So some things just keep coming. The tools collection. We have I like this one. This is a patron who calls himself Resistant Patriot. I can see that. I appreciate ADL for expanding library services to include toys, musical instruments, scientific tools, in addition to books, video, sound recordings, magazines, newspapers, digital information, and especially for promoting peace, justice, equality for all. Proud to be a patron. I thought that's a good one. That's my report. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Josie? I was so sad to miss Tiny Expo. I don't think I've ever missed it before.
I think
know others were there.
I was there. I had missed Colleen and Victoria. It was crowded, quite crowded.
It's very crowded. It was very well attended. It was that snowy Saturday, but not too bad. People were here all downtown, and they were coming in the whole time. I think, from what I understand, the crafts persons and artisans were very pleased, and the folks who came in were pleased at the variety of what was available. So that's always a good sign when people tell you that it was they felt like they got a lot of opportunity because it wasn't a lot of one type of thing. Mm-hmm. So
do we jury that?
We do. Yes, we do. We jury. We try to make sure that there's a variety and that it's quality. And some people come back almost every year, and then there are new vendors every year as well. So.
And it was a great event and super energizing. And I think the staff did a great job with a tough location for it, because it is hard, I think, to get all that activity into a space that we have to use for something else every day. So thank you to everyone who did that.
Yes. Everything has to be moved out and then put back. Yes, you're right. Thank you, Victoria.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to Sarah Winston. Yes, so you have in front of you materials that she's going to be talking about. Again, well, this is, would you call this a draft? It is not a draft anymore, but it is not yet part of the public record, but it will be very soon. Okay. But you have it in front of you.
Okay. It has been a real honor and a real privilege to work on this process for all of you, and it's really been fantastic to work with Josie and work with the executive committee. So I thank you for that honor to be here. So I wanted to just do a quick highlights of what we found and how we created the process. The biggest, I think, takeaway was that we wanted to focus that the formal evaluation, the yearly evaluation of the library director, is really less on her performance, and it's more about the organization. We wanted to encapsulate the fact that the organization is moving forward, and we wanted to give the library director a chance to reflect on the work of the library director on the library for the last year, and looking forward to the future and what challenges have happened in the organization. So, whereas in other evaluations that sometimes the evaluation is focused on the person and on the performance of the library director, this what we found was that in libraries such as ours, the real focus is on the organization. Where were its shortcomings, where were its successes, and where do we want to move forward? So that's the formal yearly evaluation. The informal evaluation, the more informal feedback sessions are on performance, and that's really the distinction between the two. And I think that's really the clear takeaway that we wanted to kind of present to all of you. So I want to jump into the timeline because I think that really talks about each of the different pieces of the. Here we go. On page 6, it should be in your packet. The timeline will go through all the different pieces of the evaluation process that we've proposed. So the first piece is the narrative that the library director will create based on, if you go to the next page on page 7, there's a list of these are different pieces that we think are important for the library director to create, or to reflect on, things like finance, facilities, products and services, and making sure to talk about both the successes as well as the challenges in each of these departments. And then really, if you go to the next page, on page 8, that there's really a reflection piece on what were the projects that maybe could have gone better. And so that there's a real piece of reflection, and I'm thinking about how we can always improve. I know Josie is never satisfied with just the status quo, so she's always thinking about how to make things better. So this is just a little nudge for Josie, not that she needs any nudges. So that's the narrative, and so she'll write this narrative. At the end of the month, if you go back to page 6, I'm still on the timeline. The executive committee will review the document, meet with the director to discuss, request clarification, and then write the memo. So this memo will be a compilation of evaluations from each of you. And so that is one of the biggest pieces that is new in this process. If you go to page 8, you'll see the evaluation form that's written up for each of the Board of Trustees, so that you all have a sense and a say in how the evaluation and the memo is created, as a place to say, I, on the Board of Trustees, this is how I feel the library has done up until now, and this is where I feel like there are opportunities for even more success. And so the library director, the executive committee, specifically the president, will create this memo that will encapsulate all of your pieces of feedback. Whereas in the past, there's been a lot of focus on maybe numbers. The most important part of this evaluation tool is that there is narrative. And so you can see on page 9 and 10 and 11, that there is a lot of room for narrative, for specifics, for things that you feel have gone really well, that it's not enough just to put a number, that there has to be specifics, because otherwise we don't know how we can constantly improve or constantly succeed. So that's the evaluation and the transmittal memo. You can see next on page 7, the board president will share the narrative and the memo with the full board. And then the trustees will each review the packet and individually complete the evaluation form. That's where the evaluation form is there, and submit it to the board president. And then what will happen is each of these, the executive committee will convene a special meeting for the board to discuss the both memo as well as the narrative in a full packet to be able to bring to the public into the board meeting in May.
Now, does this mean that the individual trustees will make their evaluations in this way?
Correct.
And then the president will create a narrative bringing all of those points of view together?
That's exactly right.
Then the executive committee will decide if they approve of the narrative?
They approve of the narrative from the board president?
No, yes, before it's presented to the director.
Well, I think the
We'll all
entire
have the ability
right.
to. The executive committee will convene a special session.
Right.
And then because of the Open Meetings Act, Josie will have the ability to say whether she permits us to do that and whether we can be there, whether or not she is there. And then we'll all talk about it together.
I'm still not quite.
I know what you're asking, Jen. So what happens is we all, as individuals, will fill out the form, and that will go to the president, currently Jamie. Jamie will do, as you were saying, which is to create a summary,
compilation.
a compilation
Right.
that includes all of our feedback. That compilation will then come back to the full board for our review and approval, and
Before it's presented.
Before it's presented to Josie. That's right.
That's a process that part is what we've done in the past.
Right.
But the other evaluative part is not, so that's good.
That's right.
It gives we really wanted to make sure that everybody has a voice, and that's and again, as I said before, that it's not just numbers, because numbers don't tell a story, right? They don't give color. They're black and white, and as you'll see, it's important to provide metrics, and that's part of the conversation that we've had with Josie too, is making sure that there are key metrics that we think are important to see from year to year to year. But the number evaluation there has to be some color to it. There has to be some kind of story that comes with it. So I just want to bring up, so that's the timeline, and that really brings all of the different pieces together. I wanted to bring up a couple of other pieces that were new, just like Jan talked about the evaluation, the actual evaluation form. So as I just said, one of the things that is new is that we wrote out an outline to guide the library director, and that there's a list of kind of must-haves, including metrics, because we do believe that metrics on a large scale are important. To be able to see from year to year where does the growth look like, and what are those numbers? What are those numbers? So that's number one. Number two is, as I said before, the narratives. That's something also that's new, and it'll also give more content and more color, as I said, to support the letter written by the board president. So that I think will be helpful. So I also wanted to bring up we updated the job description for the library director. So that's at the very back of your packet. And so I think part of when I came into this opportunity, we thought it was just about the evaluation form, but little did I know it's also about creating a job description, because really I think Josie does so much that all of us can't really keep track. And so this was hopefully a step forward in understanding a little bit more about what she does, so that it gives us also a little bit more clarity in how to evaluate. And so we actually did the job description almost first before we even went into the evaluation form, to make sure that we understood exactly what she was doing. I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
I just say that one of the things that I am really looking forward to in the process is a more sort of standardized way of gathering feedback from the full board, which has been one of the kind of stumbling blocks that we've had in the past. So this is I'm looking forward to going through that process with everyone. And I also think it sets up a process that is, I know for Jamie and others that have served as president in the past, that this process of trying to generate a letter every year without a lot of collected feedback to begin with is often challenging. So
We've had collective feedback, but based on the structure of our evaluating thing, it was hard to be specific.
Exactly. There wasn't a structure for us to give our feedback, and I think it made writing the letter harder than it needed to be.
I also want to say one more thing. I wanted to make sure that we pointed out, I think this was an interesting conversation that we brought up in the job description, just going back to the job description. There were lots of conversations around, if you go to page 13, or actually the next page, about the requirement of having an MLS as part of the job description, and we all kind of decided that wasn't a requirement in the future, and I think that
Ed will want to address that. Right, Ed? The requirement of it, that will come up.
okay.
Not now.
Okay, fantastic. Great.
Yes, I guess to kind of summarize that discussion, when we're looking at the type of person we want to do this job, that qualification didn't seem relevant. But I agree that there's plenty to discuss related to that in the future.
I don't know, but I thought there was something connected to the state library
You're
that
correct.
required something, and
Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Right, so it will require further discussion at the point that we need to use
When
the
we
job
deal with that.
description to
Right.
fill the position.
Thankfully, we have some years before we need to use it.
Exactly.
So works out well for all of us.
Well, it could change. Michigan Library would
Correct.
change.
That's
Right,
exactly right.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. So trying to think forward.
do we have to adopt this as a matter of policy, Josie, or is it one of those things that's just sort of a practice and a tradition?
It's a practice. The job description is generally something that we develop through HR, and the board has never been involved in the job descriptions generally in the staff. I think this one's different, especially if you're talking about a requirement that has where the absence of a requirement could have a monetary penalty on the library
Right.
for instance. But and as Jan says, that could change. The state could change its stuff requirements. But the process itself, no. We looked today. Karen and I looked back through board packets that went back many years, and there's not ever been a formal adoption of a evaluation process for the library director. So it's a practice.
Great question.
But I would like to be the one that says that that's also in here, and is a commendation to the boards of this library over time. What Sarah found in her discussions with libraries around the country is that we have a formal process to evaluate the library director, and many of them don't. And so it's a positive that I think that we do.
Absolutely.
We were dissatisfied with ours, so that's why we're upgrading.
I'm excited to try this process because last year was my first time using this process, and I found the most difficult thing was reading through Josie's narrative and having very little context for knowing how to make comments. And also, it wasn't necessarily the things that I wanted to understand.
Right.
It felt like it was an update of past documents. So
And it was.
So this, we'll start with it. I think it should help.
I hope so.
Yeah, maybe one thing, maybe I was too focused on following as you were discussing that I missed. One thing I want to make sure that you come away with is that there's the formal evaluation process and the timeline for that, but then built into this is an informal structure too for the at the moment, it's the executive committee that's charged with that. That could always change in the future. But like, so that we're not just doing this once a year, like instead, that gives us a chance to have conversations so that Josie or anyone in this role has the chance to sort of think about, you know, what they want their growth to be like, or areas where they need more support to achieve something. Like right now, we don't have a mechanism to have any conversations like that. We're always talking about the library, which is important, and that's what you do. But we want to make sure we talk about you too. So, any other questions? Well, great. Thank you for getting us through this. We're excited to try it all out.
Fantastic. Looking forward to hearing about it. Okay.
Okay, so that brings us to a discussion for which we do not have a guest tonight. We are on our own to manage this discussion. But you each have in front of you a draft, or each of you up here have this draft. I'm sorry that you don't have it if you are not sitting up here. But we are looking at a draft of the survey that will be conducted of AADL patrons by phone, conducted by Ethic MRA. And we need to review this draft that we've been presented with and kind of bring it back so that we can get a final version. So I think what we're most interested in is what did you think we were going to ask that we're not asking here? What are we asking that you don't think we need to ask? And any other feedback that you have.
Is it going to be helpful just as a matter of process to just walk through the question, to read through the questions?
Would that be helpful to you all?
Or have people done their homework?
Or even if you did do your
Or
homework, it
even
might
if
be
you
a
did,
little
it
bit
might
like.
still be helpful.
Well, does anything stand out? Maybe we can just say that because it's 50, no. Quite a few
So
questions.
page one is about qualifying, right? So we start with, who are you? Page one, page two, those are qualifying questions.
Right. Right. So we asking some of the same questions that we asked before, where they're like, how do you feel about your taxes? Do you think they're too high, too low, just right? And then we ask more specifically about like the library in the context of other services. We ask them to help them, we ask them whether or not they understand how we're funded, which is something we asked before and we kind of debated about whether to include this time.
Was it only the last time we asked about the funding after we had been doing the newsletters? That was the first time. I think it would be good to ask it again.
Yeah, that's kind of where we ended up. We want to see if that's different.
And then we dropped questions where the answers were pretty definitive. So if it was,
I'm sorry?
80. So we dropped some questions where we felt like the response was pretty definitive. If it was an 80% response, yes, then we dropped that. But if it was a 50-50, then we kept it.
What was new?
So
So they're highlighted like question 20 is new.
Question
Oh,
8
good.
is changed into a question about the electronic newsletter, which is a new it's a new program or a new publication. So that was a swap out from the previously printed paper.
yes, so number 20, exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Whereas we had asked questions before that were more leading towards the changes we were going to make at Westgate, we dropped some of those, and we dropped a few of the things that were more related to the communications piece we were interested in last time in order to make room for a question like this one, which is covering, you know, what if we were going to do something about our presence here and we needed to ask you to help us with that? How do you feel about that?
That's 20B.
Would it be helpful if I read 20?
Sure. Yes, please, thanks.
There are two versions of 20, right?
There's 20,
20A,
20A,
20B.
So let's start with 20.
And 20.
For several years, there has been discussion in the Ann Arbor community about renovating, replacing, and using a combination of upgrades and new construction to improve the condition and expand the usable space of the Ann Arbor District Library's main downtown facility at 5th and William Street. While there are currently no specific plans for any construction or improvements to the downtown library, if a request were placed before voters in an upcoming election to increase the millage to pay for the bond that would fund such construction activity, would you vote yes to support such a millage request, or would you vote no to oppose it? If undecided or depends, ask, well, if you had to decide right now, would you lean toward voting yes? Who's the man from Epic MRI who came to speak with us?
John.
John. Yeah, we talked to him about this.
So my first thought when I read the question is it's asking about sort of an ability to invest in the library as opposed to in order to get something specific. You know what I mean? It's not saying, would you be interested in supporting this piece of it? And so I just wonder I mean, it sort of is asking if folks are willing to support an increase in the millage for a purpose that hasn't been stated. And I just wonder what we're going to, I mean, how useful is it? What question is that actually answering for us? People's,
Right. Is that the question? Right.
Right.
In this survey, when you get somebody on the phone finally, and you tell them, how long do you tell them it will take you to read these questions? How long will this conversation
Yes,
take?
it says at the beginning, it's
A few minutes.
It's
Few minutes.
Yeah, it's less, yeah, well, when you're
I'm
asking.
surprised if anybody will give you enough time on the phone to deal with all this.
Fortunately, they do.
I know, but it's amazing. I
So
wouldn't.
part of the reason I wanted to read that aloud was to see how long it would take, because I didn't do that in my homework. 20A and 20B, you're dealing with the same length.
Yeah.
20A, now I would like to give a little more information about the history of the downtown library.
Yeah, these struck me as quite long in that context. I agree. They're quite a bit longer than the
Yeah.
questions from the previous
Yeah,
version.
they're important questions. What Victoria is saying is an interest. Do the questions lead, right? Do the questions lead you to say yes or no? It's a yes or no. How much do I like my library? Would I pay for it? And it's more of a gut question because it says like, hey, we're just thinking about this. Is it an easy yes? Is it an easy no? It's a snapshot in time.
So what is the question you feel like we need to ask?
So the question I'd be interested in more is what people want to get out of a new library that they can't, I mean, that they couldn't get out of our existing facility, that what a reinvestment would buy for people. Does that make sense?
A little bit, but it sounds hard to ask.
It's an interesting question, but it's very close to the question of like, what is it that you want
Right.
Yes.
in terms of services? And when we ask that question, it doesn't yield any useful information.
Well, the list is like
It's like
that
this
long.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm with you. And of course, everyone wants everything. I mean, yeah, you ask me, do you want, faster internet speed? Yes.
Right. Right, but when we talk about what we want to do here, I think I always hear you say, like, what are we going to do if we do something different? It's not just that we want to do something different. What? Like, be
What's the
specific.
benefit that we're all getting out of it?
So, it's the awkward part of needing to get this information before we have the ability to be more specific.
But the way this is designed addresses it. What do because they're specific in here. Do we want meeting rooms? Do we want study rooms? Value that. Put a value on that. I mean, it's an imperfect way. I mean, it's more of a quantitative survey, right? It's a phone survey.
What do you guys think about 20A, all this bit about the history?
Yeah, it's a lot of background info. I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to keep people on the phone for that.
Like, if you just started with, we haven't done anything in 27 years, does that make you feel differently? It just feels like too
20B.
much.
Yeah.
I mean, 20B following. So you've gotten to say 3 words when someone's read to you for 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
That's really hard. And then, like, this meat part, like, hey, do you want study rooms? I wouldn't be ready to answer, do I want study rooms after I've been talked at about the history of the library, personally. I might be annoyed at that
What were you
point.
going to say?
I would get annoyed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I should say that
I got annoyed when I was reading it.
because we've asked John to do this for us, and he has done this professionally for a long time. I'm not suggesting that we just write off whole portions of this very nice draft. I think what we want to tell him is this feels really long. Why are you asking about the history? So I just want to make it clear I'm not planning to put this through the shredder and be like, start over.
Yeah. I think the question, so 20 is really just, from what I understood, was just trying to gauge the sense of where people are at, if in understanding where we're at so far. I mean, we're almost into a year of meeting and discussing what we would like, or what we know we would like so far. So it'll be interesting to see who has followed along, who needs more information.
Would anyone counter that the questions are not too long, like Jim or Ed or Jan or someone hasn't said?
They're long.
Too long.
I mean, John's really the expert, to be
Right.
perfectly frank. So John wrote these questions, and
Right.
and so we
He's
can ask.
willing to do it.
We can ask him about the sequencing and about the sort of, the length of the question given the success of the or the success rate. I mean, the fact is like they won't stop surveying people until they get a certain number of completed surveys for us. So if the question doesn't work for a person and they decide they want to stop the survey, that
And what is the number of completed surveys that we count on receiving?
I can't remember what the N was last time.
Between 400 and 500.
And how long does that usually take them to achieve that number?
They've
The
done it.
survey's conducted in February, and we hear a report in March.
Yeah, so it's like usually
They do it over a 3 or 4 day
3
period.
weeks. Yeah.
What's the meaning behind 20B? Why would we want to bring something up that's 5 years old? How is it, what are we trying to get to with that one?
I think he's just giving us a set of
Choices.
of how we'd want to approach the question. The purpose is to test the appetite of the public for doing something
Okay.
here in our downtown site.
Right.
So you view this as 3 different versions of a question, not 3 different questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't like 20B.
So is there a preference among the board then for the versions? I mean, it kind of reads to me like he's going to ask it all 3 times.
Oh, yeah, me too. Let me ask you again.
Right,
Because,
let me ask you a final time.
right. I read it as he's going to read these all to you.
Right, agreed.
And I don't
thought it
like
was a choice.
leading
That's too
with, in 2012, this happened. Because I
You just have to ask him.
Yeah, let's
Okay,
ask.
we'll ask.
yeah.
And Jim, I do take your comment seriously that he's an expert in survey design, so I don't mean to
Yeah.
nitpick at things, but to me, it would make a lot more sense to ask questions about whether or not people are likely to, how they feel about making an additional financial investment in the downtown branch after you talk about the things you wish you had in your library, which is questions 25 A, B, and C. It's like you've looked at the services that are offered, and you've expressed what you're interested in. It seems weird to ask about money before you say what you're trying to do with it.
What your money could buy you. Yeah.
I just, having gone through this process before, there is quite a bit about, the lead up to this set of questions really has to do with the value. And we know what ends up happening is most people think that we're a really great value for
Yes.
what they're paying, right? So that
Right.
we would suspect something like that to happen again, hopefully. And then it leads into questions about usage. So, I guess you have to, I don't know. There's clearly a logic, and I think it could go any number of ways. But I think one of the questions would be just to ask me about sequencing and whether or not questions regarding a millage or a renovation or a reconstruction of this building could come after people were talked about services.
Yeah, I think Victoria's point's a really good one. Yeah. It's like, we don't want this to be structured so that we get answers that are not what people would, we want their natural response,
Yeah.
even if it's not what we want to hear. But I think on the other hand, we don't want to ask them a question without giving them the information they need to make the decision. We will definitely ask about that. Other comments? This is, as I look through here, the meat of where he's getting at, the things we want to ask him about related to this.
We are
Project?
continuing to ask questions about the tools collection and usage.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Which is also important to the staff to understand, kind of the perception of that particular collection. There's an additional question about pulp, which continues to be an investment the library is making. And if I remember correctly, Eli, pulp had just started when we did this survey last time. There's also this question about these set of questions about the downloadable collection, questions about the participation in the summer game and sort of perception of the summer game.
It almost seems to, I'm interrupting.
Yeah.
It almost seems to me, in some ways, now I could be totally wrong, but if those particular questions about services that are being offered now, if that presents the value of what they're giving,
and it precedes the.
and it almost could precede these other questions about how much more would you be willing to invest in even further development.
Which is, I think, the feedback that we would give John. I mean, I suppose you could make the argument both
And he
ways,
could
which is to say,
well, that just doesn't work, but But as we're discussing it now, it seems to me that these questions about our particular innovations almost state something about the kinds of things we do and the kinds of things we might continue to develop.
And I think that's the big difference between the survey and the old survey. So the former survey was more on satisfaction, right? So program and then I think this is really more about trying to get an understanding of what people know about the library and how they come about it.
Yeah, but you might kind of get that out of them by mentioning things that they may not think of if you ask this big, long question about valuing and, the number 20.
Right.
They might, as they answer these questions about the tools and all that, oh my gosh, that's really amazing. What, they,
Right.
and then they reflect on what else might happen.
Do I hear maybe everyone kind of coming to this idea that I think he's trying to interpret us making a case by presenting what he's presented in these long questions. But I hear us saying that we think the case is better made by what the library does than by presenting like the sort of the situation the library's in. Like the history of how structurally where we were positioned. Now would you give us more money? That's kind of how he's asking it. I mean, I say that in a way that makes it sound like there's no art to it. I know that, he's put a ton.
No, but think about the person who's trying to answer all this.
Right.
You know how I interpret this? He heard what we were saying when he met with us. He's interpreted what we said.
Exactly.
And they're in here. Is the website in here, Jim? New website?
No, we're not talking about the website in this survey because it will have just launched. And we know that
Lightning rod.
any kind of website launch is going to upset people, no matter how great and fabulous and wonderful
Well,
it
it takes
is.
getting used to.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think when we were talking about that in the committee, the decision really was to let the website launch and breathe and give people the time to become familiar with it before you're asking them to really. I mean, we would be asking them to process questions about the website 4 or 5 weeks after the website launched, which is really unfair.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
And I think we can get that feedback from the website.
We will.
we will.
We're going to get that feedback naturally anyway.
There's an obvious thing with survey. Why wouldn't you ask me? Okay, so imagine you're on the other end of the phone. They just launched a website. They changed my whole world, and they didn't ask me about it?
Well,
I
it doesn't.
would find it...
I mean, I think it's interesting, but we have an intention with the survey.
Right.
And our intention with the survey is not to understand in this particular iteration how good or bad the website launch is
Right.
going. We're going to get a lot of real-time feedback about that, just from users, period. And the intention of this is really one of customer satisfaction, understand how programs and services are being used and how they're being perceived and processed, to test the appetite for redevelopment
Right.
here.
I understand that, but will the survey taker understand that?
Yes,
Okay,
I think so.
okay.
We're paying them.
This is a super small point, but in questions 26 and 27, where we're highlighting the special collections, none of it's like the secret labby kind of stuff. Like,
You mean like
Like-
tonight, like the sewing lab?
oh,
Like more
and
like a
just-
program?
We've got artwork, prints, scientific tools, musical instruments. I just wonder if this question needs to include some of the things that have been added to the collection more recently, like the sewing machine.
That's interesting.
Just, I mean, my guess is that we've added some things to our collection since the examples were
I mean, we
pulled.
could revise 26, include more specific examples.
Yeah, or,
That'd be interesting.
yeah.
It also does bring a good question about just like events. We don't actually ask any questions
Yeah.
about events. I don't know how important that is, though. We want to talk to the staff about whether or not
Wondered
there's
about that
anything that
too.
you're dying to
Don't we
know.
already don't we do surveys at events or not all events?
No.
We've stopped doing surveys at events because they're always 5, 5, 5, 5,
Yeah.
5. It hasn't been
Well
very
done.
useful. Not for years.
But that's the people who chose to go to the event. This is our chance to talk to people who think, oh, there's never anything I want to do at the library. But not that there is such a person out there.
I think we can definitely put a pin in events to talk about
Yeah.
at a future time we go forward with something like this.
As we move through the survey, just so that everyone's aware of the major kind of categories here, 41 is an overall, like an aggregate satisfaction score. 43 is querying people's media diets, try and find out where people get information, which we've decided to ask again, because we want to see sort of what the change will look like, and we can also cross-tab that with demographics to understand how, you know, a 24-year-old patron gets information about, you know, the world versus a 75-year-old patron.
Or someone who says no,
Yeah.
where they get their information versus someone who says yes.
So I'm just noticing it doesn't say Facebook, Twitter, podcasts, any of the stuff that's
Saturday Night Live.
local resources, local resources that are more crowdsourcing instead of a published item.
We should make a note of that and just ask John about other
Yeah.
categories.
There's
One of the other kind of change questions here was 47A, which is a question about how long people intend to stay in Ann Arbor, which is to get a sense of people's intention
Just how transitory.
to be in this community and how transitory
Right.
the survey takers view themselves to be.
Be interesting if their other responses were different based on that answer.
Right.
It's another cross tab situation where we can maybe. I mean, one of the ideas was to sort of look at appetite for redeveloped concept for downtown against the sort of perceived commitment
Right.
that people have to the community. That's what we'll be looking for, and the rest is demographics.
Which is what we had last time.
Gender of respondent, can we have something that isn't binary?
Yeah, we talked about this.
We had a
actually.
conversation about this.
So all three of us felt really uncomfortable when we noticed the way that this gets collected, and John explained to us that this is how surveys are done. This like industry standard to assess the gender of the person you're talking to based on their voice,
It's not actually a question.
right? And we were really uncomfortable
Oh,
about that, but
yeah.
then I think we're sort of coming up against this is the way,
This is a sort of industry practice
Right.
versus a set
Yeah.
of values that
So-
some of us might have.
It might not be useful at all to us. I mean, if it's not something that we need.
So my question is, I mean, I sort of agree that like if you want to have a question about gender, you should really be asking
it,
people
yeah.
what their selected or preferred gender pronouns
Correct.
are.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to do that, we should simply not record gender as a matter of the survey. And John went to great lengths to say that it won't affect any outcome of the survey. unless we're trying to do a crosstab based on
Gender.
Right.
So, yeah, because there are goals to try. So, you don't want to end up doing a survey of only males or females. So the reason it's in there is to try to make sure there's distribution there.
Differentiate.
No, that makes sense.
But still, I felt uncomfortable about it, and I can see that you do too. And
It's our survey, so if we want to ask people to self-identify, then we can do that.
Yeah. I'm uncomfortable with mining that data from a person's voice. And, but I also agree that we want a range of people
right.
answering the survey. Yes.
There was a survey I was involved in recently, and the number of gender options for online surveys now is pretty long, because and there should be. And
Right.
do you want to give people 14 options over the phone? I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, have to give them the option, just ask the question.
Yeah.
We can make an open-ended question. It doesn't have to have.
I kind of like that. How do you, do you have a gender preference that you identify by? We still live in a time where for some people that question opens a whole can of worms because it's not commonplace yet. But I like that question. How do you identify as your gender? How would you like us to identify you?
I should
And
say,
if they
ask
say
people
I
what is your gender,
I
and
also
people
feel
can
like,
do that any way they want to. And if it's important for us to know, I mean, now the standard is essentially like you ask people what their gender is, and then there are a number of options, and then you also ask an additional question, which is to ask people if they identify as transgender. So there's just a cascading set of survey practices now around gender, which is why when you take a survey, it's lots of different options.
I mean, I think that if industry standard hasn't caught up to, like, the world,
Values.
then we need to say something to help industry standard change. Like, if we just accept that, then we won't, maybe we won't see a change. So I do think, because this came up in both this meeting and the last meeting, we will definitely discuss this with him further.
On the other hand, that's not the purpose of this survey. To help industry standards change, I think that whatever we decide to do needs to be based on the goals of the survey.
Which will help us understand what the
And
community we
You're
serve.
looking for a set of, you're looking for results that are useful to us. And if gender identification is one of those, then you fashion your questions to give whatever range you wish to get. If gender identification is not, then you take a more traditional route. I think we have to be careful to not impose our own political standards on the goals of the survey.
So I
Trying to get a survey that's consistent with previous surveys to measure change over time. And I'm not recommending a way to do that one way or another. I think simply that we don't want to lead on that issue. We're looking for reliable results.
So I agree with you with some of what you said, Ed, but the other thing, the only compelling argument I've heard for why we're even looking at gender is because we want to have a broad sampling.
Right.
And that does make sense to me. We don't want to somehow inadvertently have everyone be 43 years old or something. We want a range of people. And gender can help us with that question if we know people's gender so that we get representative. But I haven't heard anyone on this board say, and we want to be able to slice the data by gender, and so we want to have it binary so we can slice it.
Exactly. So I think that's the argument John was making. He's like, you want to get an even distribution of people who live in your community, and the answer to this question isn't helping you do that.
Right.
But on the other hand, it just feels icky to see like you assess the person without asking them.
I will be frank, I decline to respond to any question having to do with race, period. Having grown up in a segregated world where I did, it just sets me off, and I don't think we should be asking it, though I know that organizations in the law sometimes require it. He won't get it from me. And with gender, if we have something we're looking for, then we should ask whatever question will get that answer. And if we don't, I'm not an expert on these tests, so I don't have an opinion.
Yeah.
Just want reliable information.
I would, based on, in part, what Ed said, which is, does it help us conduct a better survey? Frankly,
Right.
I feel that knowing gender and allowing people to choose their gender and not just to have to choose one of two makes sense to me. It does help us accomplish the goals of the survey, which is ultimately to make sure that we have a diverse representation within the survey. It helps us do that, to make sure that we're serving the community appropriately. I'd say include it, and my suggestion is kick it back to John and say, we feel it's important to give more than two options.
How can we do that and still have a great survey?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some way.
We can't be the first.
But does this mean that when they compile the required number, if they have too many of one sex or another, they'll keep going till they balance it?
Right.
Do they balance it? Are we balanced 50-50, men and women in our?
Well, I mean, I don't know what balance means, really.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think you have to rely on the experience of the people who are pulling this all together to try to understand that he's asking that question to make sure that you're not only talking to males or females who meet all your other requirements and all your other, so all the people answering are not 17-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 70-year-old women, and that's why they're doing it. They're not even asking the question, right? So the fact that you're objecting to how that information is assessed,
Right.
I think is what you're saying.
Right.
Not that there is or isn't a question. That's
Right.
your objection.
Yes.
He answered that objection in the committee,
Right.
and so I think he'll probably answer it the same way if you ask him again.
Yeah.
But you should ask him again because it came up here.
Yep.
We will bring a better answer.
Okay. Have we collected all of your feedback that comes to mind at the moment? I mean, we're not going anywhere. We know where we live. But I think that I have a pretty good summary, and with Karen's help, we'll have a much better summary of what you've said to deliver back to John with Josie's help.
Great, good.
I must say, having recently been cold calling for political reasons, just asking people to call their council person or
Yeah.
something, or for their representative. Getting people to talk to you is not easy.
I know.
And I don't envy at all the people who are going
Agreed.
to have to do this.
I'll talk to you anytime you want, Jen. She's fun to talk to.
Yes.
Okay,
I was
think
reading a
that
script, so I called
Eli is going to talk to us about this new website that we're all so excited about.
All right, so we're doing a thing.
Yay!
So just today, wake up my mouse here. Or not, all right. There we go. Okay, so just today we have launched the open beta of the website at new.aadl.org. There's a new post on the front page of the website that details some of the upcoming service interruptions and invites people to have a look at the new website. Thank you to all of you who took a look and gave us feedback. It was very helpful. We made a number of changes based on things we heard from you as well as from the staff during the closed beta. And we're in the home stretch here. So here are the things that you might be likely to hear about, because now we're in hardcore service interruption land. Where previous to this point, it was mostly just Mel that was affected. But as of today, we are not filling holds anymore. Okay? This is something that's possible to hear about because the last time we didn't fill holds was the Great Blackout of 2003. So it's been quite a number of years since the last time we didn't do this. The challenge is, in case you hear about it, is that we cannot have any items on the hold shelf at the time of migration. So we want to, because the on hold shelf is not a migratable status. right? So what we have to do is clear out the hold shelves. We want to give people the full 6 days, including the 2 days that will be closed for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So the last holds for Millennium and for 2017 have hit the hold shelf today. Okay? So you missed
Sorry,
it.
Jim, you're not getting that one.
This includes us pulling things that are available off the shelves. Nothing new can be added to the hold shelves. So while we can tell patrons when they call that something is still on the shelf, there's not a mechanism at all by which we can hold it for them, including can you just set it for us on the desk for a few minutes? That is quickly unworkable. So what we can do is we can say it's here on the shelf right now. That's what we can tell you. Unfortunately, we're sorry for the service disruption, but there aren't other solutions at this point.
I'm sorry, Eli, you said you can't fill, but people can still place and
They can still place holds up until the website goes down at 10 p.m. on the 29th. People can still place holds, and those holds will be moved to the new system. What they cannot do is have those holds filled, even if it's on something that's available. Okay, so that's probably the most significant service interruption that is happening through all of this, other than the closure and the website being offline New Year's weekend. So then that gets us through to the 26th, which is when, at the end of business on the 26th is when all the hold shelves will be cleared. So that gives an extra day, that's actually 7 days of business from when the last hold was filled. So that gives everybody an extra day to try to get their stuff in. So hopefully we should get everything off. And if someone calls on the 26th and they're coming on the 27th, it's okay. That's partially why it's the 26th and not the 29th. So we have a little bit of cushion in there if someone calls and can't make it in, especially during the
Eli,
holidays.
how
Yes.
many books are typically on those shelves?
Across the whole system, we might have as 3,000 across all locations. This is just totally spitballing on a busy day. Typically, we fill about 40,000 holds a month, but many of them will sit on the shelf for 5 or 6 days. So it depends on the volume. You can take a look at the shelves on your way out on the first floor. So it's usually about 2,000 to 3,000 items per location. So those will all be cleared by mid next week. Then the next step is that, and one other service interruption that we'll have, which is a weird one, is that we need to start moving the patrons over. So we will not be able to create any new library cards next week. So we're open on the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, and 29th. That's 4 days when we won't be able to create new library cards because we would just have to create them again on the new system. However, we will have a mechanism by which staff can send someone home. They can take their application, they can give them the card, ask them to come back after the library's new system is up, and we will have a way that they can send them home with something with it checked out to a dummy account, so we don't have to turn people away. But we will not be able to give them an account that they can log into or any of those kinds of things. Okay, so that's coming up as well. Then on the 29th at 10 p.m., about an hour after close, the website goes down. It will be replaced by a web page that says under construction. Maybe we'll get a little 90s era GIF from GeoCities or something like that to say under construction and that the new website is coming and it will launch on the 2nd. Now, we do have a safety net in mind because this is a, I wouldn't say a high risk project, but there are a lot of moving parts. Our absolute worst case, if something essentially explodes during that weekend, is we can open back up on Tuesday with the old system still running because none of this is destructive to the old system or the old website. Clearly, that is not something we want to have happen, but that's our safety net in essence if something goes wrong. So you heard it here first and hopefully last. So basically, we're in very good shape as far as parts of the website. We're on track for all of the essential functions of the library to be working, including placing holds, placing lists. The catalog is working very well. We'll do a quick search here. So you can see we get the pop-ups now that tells you some different items. Whoops. And then you get your search results. And one thing that's likely to be very popular is a new grid view for items so that you can see lots of things like that.
Much better.
We're working through all the facets. This now sticks. When you click on an individual item, of course, then you can, I'm not signed in right now, but then you can sign in to request. I'll go ahead and sign in here as the beta tester user. So now I can place a request for another location, etc. All the basic stuff is working. This one I can't request because there's no copies of it. You can see, so you get the instant response. On the My Account page, we've been testing this extensively with a bunch of different users and on a bunch of different platforms. You can see our dummy user has a $49 account balance. So you get the message here about the account balance being over $25. So all of the renewal items, of course, I won't be able to renew things, but when your account is blocked, you can still freeze and unfreeze. So I can select this whole column and say freeze, and then it chews through all of them and will slowly freeze all of them as they go. So we can see those all got frozen. So that's where we're at with the basic functions. For the beta test, basically none of the static content has been loaded. We're working on that right now. So none of these links go anywhere at the moment, just like with the test that you saw. That's all yet to come as we finish out the content over the next couple weeks. The Explorer items are getting loaded. All of the events are getting loaded. We will be offering, with the launch, 2 new bookable meeting rooms at the downtown library. Those are the 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. We'll be using the same method that we used to offer the bookable meeting rooms at Westgate to offer those 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. Yes.
I have a really geeky library question for
All right.
you. But when you did the search for cows,
Yes.
why was something you have no copies of, like, kind of high up in the list?
We haven't done any relevancy ranking as far as how that goes. Relevancy ranking is not loaded on this version.
Okay.
But
Right, I'm
typically,
satisfied.
typically although we don't often do relevancy ranking based on availability, because usually the most popular items have no availability. Something that has no copies won't even
right,
show
that one
up in
had
the results.
no copies.
Yeah, if we have 0 copies, 0 circulating copies, it's suppressed from search results.
Great, okay.
Yeah. Now, one thing that you can't do now as a patron is see those items at all. When you're logged in as staff, you get a pink box that says AADL has no copies of this. With the new website, people will be able to opt in to seeing items that we don't have any copies of anymore. It's helpful for summer game and things like that. And
Yeah.
sometimes, did you used to have this?
No,
Or especially
I mean,
people who are like, I
read
know
that.
you had this, what happened?
Right.
So that makes it helpful. So they will be able to check a box that says show items with no copies. And that'll be an option. Yes.
So Eli, January 2nd is the release.
Yes.
I'm sure there's going to be some things that are on your list that you want to change that won't make it into January 2nd.
Oh, yeah.
So how does that work? Do we have rolling releases?
Yeah,
or-
we will continue once the dust settles, once we're comfortable with how everything's working and everything's working well with the staff, and especially the big thing is frozen and unfrozen holds changes everything. I mean, it is a huge change to our process of operation. One very big example is we expect there to be a lot of frozen holds. Okay, so for example, right now, if you're number 1 of 254, you know that you're next, right?
Yes.
But it could be that you're number 41 of 254, but you're still next because there's 40 frozen holds in front of you in line.
Right.
So we got to see some of those things that are really difficult to test in a vacuum. What are the best ways to communicate that so the patron knows that they're really next?
Right.
All those kinds of things. That's going to be our focus, is on holds and renewals and the base library functionality. Then we'll circle back around and start adding new things. But, you know, we've been putting off rolling updates for basically 2 years working on this project. So once this is out the door and the dust is settled, then we start with updates all the time. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does.
One big one that we'd hope to make.
What is frozen? What are frozen holds?
So when you freeze your hold, you continue to move up the list, but it does not come onto the hold shelf for you until you unfreeze it.
You're on
So
vacation.
if you're on vacation, or if you have too many
Oh,
things
I
checked
see.
out, you can freeze your holds and you keep moving up the list, but you'll never get your copy until you get unfrozen. But you could be number 1 in line. And then as soon as you unfreeze, the next copy that comes back is yours. Yep. That's going to be far and away the most popular feature out of all of
It's
this.
up to the user whether it's frozen or not.
Correct. And they don't have to mess with it at all. They can never freeze or unfreeze a single hold. If they don't do that, it all just behaves the way it always has.
And
Yeah.
Melcat doesn't have any plans to offer that functionality.
No, I'm not aware of it. Yeah. That'll be another big thing, is joining Melcat again is a big project, because we basically have to recatalog the entire collection for Melcat. So that, like I said, that's why we haven't put a date on that yet until we get rolling with that. It'll be spring, but once we get everything up and running, then we can start working on rejoining Melcat.
I would also just say it didn't occur to me at this moment also to look at it on my phone, and it looks really great.
Worked on my phone.
Excellent.
It's
Worked on my phone.
the dynamic quality of, I mean, it's just it's so much easier to navigate than the current site. One sort of graphic design question, which is actually this here.
Yeah.
How is this problem of dealing with text on text when you have images? So I don't know if you got any feedback about that and how you might think about the design standards to try I don't know if that is
Yeah.
better, or I feel,
That's too busy. It's hard to see
yeah, it's
that.
like, yeah.
Well, and one thing is that this is still very much placeholder content, and we are anticipating that even though we have the mechanism for text in these, that a lot of them will actually have the text and the alt tag, so it's there for people with visual disabilities, but that the actual image is the text and there's not text on it at all. So there's a lot of that this part of it wouldn't even exist, and that the image would be carrying the text, and that the text is there for people who are using screen readers or adaptive technology, and it would read that to them.
That'll be better.
Yeah.
So that's going to go away.
Well, it's an option that it can be there or not be there, depending on the graphics that we put behind it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So this was something that, these are definitely placeholder images, and some of them work better than others. And also this could be more opaque, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, any other questions about any of this? Oh, just one other thing I wanted to show real quick, because we are discontinuing the mobile app as part of this, because basically the whole website is now the mobile app. So the one feature that you can currently do on the mobile app is when you log in to the front page, it gives you your barcode for easy use at the self-checks. So what we've done, I just want to show this to you, of course, our Wi-Fi has just died. Let's see if we can get on the other one.
It just gives us a card on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you are the same page that you see everywhere else, and we'll see if we can get back online. Famous last words. There we go. All right. Let's see if this comes up. Something is perhaps coming. There we go. Okay, so this is what it normally looks like when you shrink down to phone size, then your barcode appears. So when you log in as your phone without having to do anything with that, you automatically get your barcode right there so that you can log in.
That's so rad.
Okay, any other questions? Anything else I can answer about this?
What is what's the communication plan sort of beyond our own? Sorry, my brain is.
No, it's okay. We have a number of posts planned for social over the next couple weeks. There's a special newsletter going out this week.
Okay.
Actually, this release breaks the newsletter, so we will need to kind of reinvent the newsletter platform, which we've wanted to do anyway, after we get this out the door. But there will be a special newsletter coming out over this holiday weekend that tells people that this is coming in a week and talks about the new features. That'll go out to 45,000 people. Then we'll also be doing some posts that I think we're planning on putting some money behind on both Facebook and Twitter, and some posts on Instagram as well. So there's a number of things coming there.
Is it completely kooky to do a press release to MLive that would get reprinted? Which is basically what they would do.
It's not like people have a choice to use it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, it's only so far.
That wasn't meant to be shady.
And we're gonna hear what those commenters have to say regardless.
I'm
I'm
not saying it from a negative point of view. It's actually, I think
It's a huge accomplishment.
most people are going to be excited that there's this new resource.
I wouldn't send out an adulatory
I
post,
see an IT
press
person.
release until we know it works.
I'm not saying adulatory. I'm saying simply informational, as in like we have launched a new site.
Yeah.
and
Well-
it
I'm
has
with
these new
Victoria.
features.
I still would like to have the wiggle room. I still would like to have the wiggle room for something to explode that weekend.
Yeah.
So
But that anticipating is much more effective than, because we presume nothing is going to explode.
Yeah.
Or you can put that into the press release.
Okay, exactly like that. We presume nothing is going to explode.
You're also already telling 90,000 people on email, so it's not like the word won't be out.
Sorry, Ed, I cut you off.
All right, I would encourage a press releases. Many different places as an announcement can appear. One more concerned patron who all of a sudden is not concerned. And MLive is a pretty good vehicle for doing that. It doesn't cost anything. It gets a lot of coverage that we don't get. I would encourage it.
I guess partially it's not a product launch so much as it's a brain transplant.
Right.
In terms of it is an operational tool for the organization that then is used in a marketing context. And it's not like, we're not trying to drive new usage of the site through this launch. You know,
Trying to educate a public, some of whom are not quite up to speed. Many of whom are not up to speed, and some of whom won't discover it for months, but will have read it in them live. It's just, it
Okay.
doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and that's
Try
the
it.
point.
And you can say, it might explode. You can use that wonderful term, it's a brain transplant. You can do it as a direct quote from Eli in conversation.
And put your phone number in it.
Director Eli says,
Oh, no, he's gonna put.
They've already got
my
it. Your
phone
Direct
My phone
complaints
number.
to Josie
Yeah,
Parker.
exactly.
Well, kudos
Okay.
to you and the team for pulling this off. I mean,
Yeah.
This is a huge endeavor. This, and I think it says a lot about the community and how excited we are by just these little design features and our ability to kind of have kind of an Amazon experience, and also like a new news site experience for us. It's a new central place for us to gather information. So I love it. Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right, thank you very much.
Can't wait
about
to
you.
hear what the feedback is and
You will.
bated breath. Yes, it's gonna be great.
Okay, so,
We also
Yes.
oh, great, thank you.
all the things. I'm gonna as well pass them to
Okay, great,
you. The fact sheets with some of those dates on them.
great, thank you.
And there's things on social media we can share.
All this information, all this information will be shared on social starting this week, including that newsletter.
you can link
You
it
can
to
forward
the
that
press
to
release.
our address.
Yeah.
Good.
So we are to the auditor's report, I believe.
And
Would you like to introduce Tracy?
Tracy Kasperick is from Raymond, and we thank you for your patience.
Yes.
and,
Yes, sorry.
And our getting to you this evening. It's not a minor aspect of our board meeting, and it's because of the way this agenda's set up. You are the first thing in new business, so obviously we have a lot of old business that we've been dealing with, so thank you, Tracy.
No problem.
The library board does have
You
copies.
guys all have copies of the reports in front of you, okay? This will probably be a little less exciting than the last presentation, but basically I'm just gonna kind of walk through the bound copy of the report first. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So page 1 is the opinion letter. So this is where we give our opinion, and as was mentioned earlier, you did receive a unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements. And then page 4 starts the management's discussion and analysis. This is really just more of a narrative overview and analysis of the activities of the library for the year. So I'm not going to spend any time going through this. It does have the input from library management in here, so I do recommend you take some time to go through that when you are reading the statements. And then the actual financial statements start on page 11. So page 11 is your statement of net position. This statement encompasses all of the activities of the library. So it includes all of your funds, and then it also includes longer-term assets and liabilities here that you're not going to see at the individual fund level. So things like capital assets, which is your buildings and vehicles and things like that that you may own. And then also your long-term debt. Kind of there in the middle of the page, you've got long-term debt, which is your compensated absences, so your accrual for sick and vacation. And then you've also got that net pension liability there, that $1.9 million that I'm sure you guys all remember having to record. So really that is a quick snapshot of the library at June 30th. But usually what people are more interested in seeing begins on page 14. So page 14 starts your fund level statements. So this is your balance sheet as of June 30th. The first column is your general fund, and then you've got your capital projects fund. And then your non-major governmental funds is a combination of your 2 endowment funds that if you wanted to see detail for, we can, there's a statement in the back that shows those separately. So this statement summarizes all of the assets as of June 30th, and then all of the liabilities, with the difference between the 2 being your ending fund balance for the year. And then page 16 kind of tells the story of how you got to that ending fund balance. So this, again, same columns. This summarizes the revenues for the 12 months ended June 30th. It summarizes all of your expenditures for the 12 months ended. And then those last 3 lines on page 16, you can see your change in fund balance for the year, where you started and where you ended. So that first column, the general fund, you started with a fund balance of about $5 million. You had an increase of about $318,000 for the year in just your general fund. So ended at about $5.3 million in fund balance. And then on page 18 is a little bit more detail for just the general fund. This is your budget to actual statement. So that first column is your original budget, so that would have been adopted at the beginning of the year. And then the final budget column would include any amendments that were made during the year. And then you've got your actuals there as well. And then that final column shows variances between your final budget numbers and your actuals. And then the next probably 15 or so pages, starting on page 20, are the notes to the financial statements. Again, this is a lot more narrative information and a lot more detail as to some of the individual numbers in the financial statements. So if you wanted to see a little bit more detail, that information is available here. And then the last statement in here is on page 42 and 43. And again, this is just the detail of those 2 endowment funds that were combined in that statement up front. So you can see the 2 individual endowment funds. Page 42, again, is the balance sheet. It shows the fund balance broken between what's non-spendable versus what's spendable in those funds. And then page 43 shows the changes in those 2 funds for the year. So any revenue that was brought in versus any expenditures. So that is a very high level of the financial statements. I would be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
Yeah, I have one question. On page 18, I don't understand what the interest income line is telling us. And if someone has an explanation about why the budget versus actual is so different?
I do not know that offhand. I can try and find out an answer for you.
Or
Bill, is it simply what we budgeted?
Right, this is,
Or you want to step up to the podium? Do you mind? Do you mind, Tracy?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay.
yeah, this is where the, when the budget was developed, we had spent the $3 million to buy the building the year before, and that wasn't taken out of the budget when it was being prepared.
Got it.
So
So
we
we
didn't
had
collect
this-
as much interest on the account as we were hoping to, because the fund balance of that investment was much lower.
that
We didn't
makes
adjust
sense.
for that.
That
And
makes
we
sense.
didn't adjust for that in the budget.
So when we do our budget going forward, we would expect our number to be more like, I heard $268 is going to be our expected for next year.
Not necessarily. Well, it'll be higher than that.
But
It'll be a truer. We'll have a truer budget number than what they had in the 16-17 budget, because they didn't take that into account when they made the budget.
okay. I don't think I mean, maybe I should have known this, but Jim, does this match your record? I mean, does that make sense to you as an explanation for the difference as well?
Yeah, well, we asked this question when we were in the meeting,
I asked the question. We
Yeah.
didn't know the answer.
and we didn't know the answer.
Yeah.
But that makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on that report? There's one other smaller report, referred to as the management letter. The first 4 or 5 pages are really just our standard required communications to you guys. Basically, the first part is stating you guys, these are your financial statements, you are responsible for them, and our responsibility is to just express an opinion on them. And then there's just a few other things. I mean, if we had any disagreements with management, or if we encountered any difficulties in performing the audit, those would have to be disclosed here, but there was nothing like that. So everything else in this letter is pretty standard. And then attachment A to that letter is where we provide our findings or our comments and recommendations. So you can see here we did have one finding related to an audit adjustment that we needed to make. Any adjustments that are found as part of the audit process we're required to bring to your attention. So there was just that one adjustment that was that came up. And then also, less material, just considered an other matter, is that one of the journal entries that we looked at was missing the reviewer sign off and the supporting documentation for it. So it is your policy to keep that supporting documentation and have someone independent of the preparer reviewing those. So we just recommend that you make sure that policy is followed. And then attachment B is just some exciting upcoming GASBs. I'm not going to go into any detail on those, but those are there for your information. And then attachment C is just the management representation letter. So this is something that management signs, basically saying that they've let us know everything that we need to know. So
One thing I'll ask you, if you can,
Okay.
in the GASB changes, because we're all understanding now the pension liability and how that's reported.
right,
There's a GASB change that's going to add retirement benefit.
healthcare, other post-employment, yep.
Right. Can you just mention that?
Yes, so GASB 75, which will be applicable in fiscal year 18. So the same thing you did with your pension liability related to MIPSers, you're going to have to do with your net other post-employment benefit obligations. So you're going to have another big liability recorded on the books.
But we understand what that liability means. I mean, we understand our responsibility and how that's working through. I just wanted to make sure the board knows there will be another one reported next year.
Yes, that is
Okay,
very true.
okay.
And it'll be the same type of calculation as the pension liability.
Right.
And probably very similar disclosures. So. Thank you for pointing that out.
Josie, did you want to comment on that one journal entry?
Oh, it's another matter. It's one of those, it's actually, I'm the person who initials and signs off on the journal entries, and there are dozens and dozens of them. And so I'm not surprised that I missed one.
Right.
And so as far as following the policy we do, I missed one. So I'll own it. And it's mine. Yeah, so, no.
And yes, it was just one.
Yeah.
And we didn't find anything wrong with the journal entry or anything like that. It was just missing those initials.
Didn't have the JVP on it, that's all. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Other questions? Comments? Is that all you have for us? Yes, it is. All right.
you.
Thank you very much.
right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks especially for your patience.
Tim, could you help her out? Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we're on to, yes, an item of action.
Well, yes.
These always make me think of like the Princess Bride or something. We are men of action.
I'll read the resolution.
Thank you.
The board resolves to accept the 2016-2017 financial audit prepared by Riemann, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Opposed? Okay, great. All right, so who wants to arm wrestle me for these two? Because I knew both of them well, but I feel like we should spread the love.
Wait, you got the meeting, you changed the agenda, so
Oh,
you put the
thank
meeting
you.
schedule right
Yes.
in there.
That's correct. Oh, before we get to tell Debbie and Rachel how much we love them, we have to talk about when we're going to meet in 2018. Somewhat less exciting, but okay. So, are we going to get one of our announcements?
Yeah, above the
It's
volume's turned
muted,
way
it's
down.
muted in here.
Oh, great! Nice work. Okay, so our 2018 meeting schedule. I was talking with Jim, and he was mentioning that we usually talk about this. I think we do it in January. We usually officially set the schedule, but since it's the month before January, we might as well talk about it, especially if we need to have any adjustments to the schedule. Let's see, where is that? Jim, you said that you saw.
We have often met on MLK Day, but I see, Karen, that you've indicated the meeting would happen on Tuesday, which is probably because this room is being used for.
No, the last several years, the board has moved it up.
Oh, we moved it off. We moved it off.
They moved it up of MLK Day to the Tuesday.
And there is a lot going on in the library
Yeah.
system all day.
Is the schedule online or is it in the book?
It's just, I'm just looking at the back
Oh,
page.
back page, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we're having this discussion with 2 months in front of us, which are on the back page of the front cover of our agenda, which say that we are going to meet in January on the 16th, a Tuesday, and in February on the 19th, a Monday. We have the opportunity now to talk a little bit about if there are any other adjustments we want to make, if we're okay with this January Tuesday.
We're looking at like a third Monday. We do the third Monday typically.
Correct.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I know that I personally have a conflict every Monday, January, February, and March that would conflict with our usual scheduling. Now, it's not necessary to schedule around me personally, but I do like to be present for our meetings.
Well, we know January is already proposed to meet those needs.
Yeah, that's correct.
So if we start with January, do we have any issues with this meeting on a Tuesday that evening, the 16th?
We could go to city council.
Yeah, you can go to, are they having city council on
I
that
don't-
Monday?
No?
Not on MLK Day.
Oh. Well, then, if we change it to February, we can go to city council.
Are you proposing, Jim, a change to Tuesdays through the year?
I would propose that.
This is a small point, but February 19th is President's Day as well. That is not a problem for me personally. I don't know if the other board members, there's no school, there's a couple things. It's fine for me.
Are you going to Disney World on President's Day?
I like the idea of not meeting on Mondays because of the conflict with city council.
We certainly could look into meeting on Tuesdays. Doesn't matter to me.
I would say in general, that's not great for me. It just happens to be that these two.
Oh, Tuesdays are not any
Tuesdays
better.
are typically also impossible, but it's those Mondays which are turning out to be unusually hard.
Sure.
So shall we go for Tuesdays for a quarter?
What about Thursdays?
Yes, Mr. Saravel?
My own preference is to keep it with Monday, and those who can't attend, can't attend. It has been that way now forever. It has worked astonishingly well with the minimum of conflicts. And I personally prefer Mondays and will vote for Monday.
Anyone else with a strong opinion?
Excuse me?
She asked if anyone else had a strong opinion.
I don't think I do either. I don't really care when we meet, as long as it's after work.
I mean, I would
Yes.
shift to Tuesdays for the remainder of the school year, saying
Like, so through June?
through April.
April. Oh, the
Through the
Michigan
April
school year.
meeting, Yeah. Through the Michigan school year, thank you.
All right, what about this room?
Well, I was about to say,
Yeah.
we need to look at, we were not prepared for this.
Yeah.
So we will have to look at room availability and determine whether this room is available or another room in the system where there's a possibility to broadcast. Because we aren't able to do that from everywhere.
That's right.
So that, we will understand that Tuesday's preference through April, and then we'll work and we'll get back to you.
Perfect.
Okay.
If we can keep if we simply just want to make a decision that we're going to have our next meeting on the 16th of January, that's enough, and then we can
Well,
revisit. from there.
we do that.
That's already on the schedule.
Yeah, you did that. Yeah.
That was part of our vote for
Yes.
last year. Got it.
Yeah, you go through that annual meeting in your vote, yes.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
your
I
annual
don't
meeting,
remember doing
your
that.
elections.
Yeah, I don't remember doing that either.
Well, it was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
February the 20th, the room is booked for Ann Arbor Reads It.
Okay. So, is the upstairs, that won't be done by then?
It
right?
is done.
Broadcast, or-
It's done, but I'm not sure about the broadcast. So if we meet on Tuesday the 16th in January, we'll know then what we
Great.
can do. And
Okay.
we can have a calendar proposed.
That sounds really good.
Then we can vote then.
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
I liked how we took August off based on need. I think we can leave that open, leave it, I mean,
Yeah.
on the calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Feel
it's
like
good
I
to
wanna get
have
there.
it on the calendar, but I liked that, I think no one can do anything 24/7 all year. It's good to have little breaks.
So,
Okay,
now
so
there's
that,
arm wrestling for these
do
resolutions?
we-
that was not an item of action, I don't think,
No?
was it? Or was it?
Or is it because we don't have answers?
Item of discussion.
Item
Yeah.
of discussion, so
Yeah.
we're good to move on.
Do we want to do the closed session?
You're not
Yeah,
there yet.
We're not quite there
Okay, I
yet.
just couldn't remember where we put it in the
First, we
order.
get to thank Debbie and Rachel.
Okay.
Who would like to read Debbie's? It's on page 24.
Sure, I'll read it. The board resolves, one, that it would like to officially thank Debbie Gallagher for her services as an employee from December 2nd, 1996 to December 15th, 2017 of the Ann Arbor District Library. Two, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
I'll second that.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, thank you, Debbie. Oh
She
my
is-
gosh.
She's done. She's not here.
But still, maybe she'll read the
She might
transcript.
look. She might be watching.
Yeah, Debbie is amazing. I remember when I first started working here, Debbie walked here every morning from like all the way out where I live, like west of Maple, every morning. And she was like the first person who was here always. She's just like a tireless powerhouse, and I'm sure she's going to do amazing things in her retirement. Okay. All right, now we move on to Rachel Yannikolu, which maybe I will read because I can pronounce her last name. The board resolves that it would like to officially thank Rachel Yannikolu for her service as an employee from April 7, 1986 to December 15, 2017 of the Ann Arbor District Library, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? So Rachel, if you have not visited the children's area recently, in the past few years, there's always a little table where you can like play a different sort of interactive sensory game. And Rachel has been making those for the past few years, making them. And she's like the most creative, imaginative person. She's wonderful with children. And yeah, she's just given so much to this library. So we wish her well.
And it was Rachel, so it was the Facebook post where we showed you where Rachel had so many comments from people. People who are all grown up now who remember meeting the bookmobile with Rachel on the bookmobile back way long time ago. And they still talk about it. And it's wonderful that she got that type of response from the Facebook page. And in person and a lot of others. She did her last baby play group Thursday evening, and she did second grade roundup down here on Friday. So, and then she said she was calling it good. So it's very wonderful for her.
So we wish her well too.
Yes.
All right, so now I think we can talk about.
I would like to move to call a closed session for the discussion of real estate on Tuesday, January 16th.
Second.
That's a roll call.
That's a roll call.
Victoria Green,
Aye. Yes.
Jim Lehoff,
Yes.
and Barney Newman,
Yes.
Colleen Sherman,
Yes.
Lynn Song,
Yes.
Ed Zerable,
Yes.
Amy Vanderbrook.
Yes. All right, I think that finally brings us, oh no, citizens' comments. Do you have anyone else?
I haven't received any.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. I believe we are adjourned. We'll see you in the new year. Good luck with the website. Bye.